Welcome back to the sixth episode of the Rafe Rundown. Here today, we're going to be talking about the United States' absolute need to reassert their control over the Panama Canal. Now, I know President Trump has spoken at length, and before we get into this, if you're new to the channel, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, and if you like this video, hit that like button so you can help us reach more and more people out there. But, President Trump has spoken at length about his ambitions to gain control over the Panama Canal again. And he cited really his primary reasoning behind it is China's ability, and I guess not just their ability, but their threat from China as his primary reasoning. Now, Trump has made a lot of bold claims about China, whether it's having boots on the ground, having direct control, indirect control. And at the end of the day, you can make the case for a lot of it, for direct control, indirect control. I haven't seen any evidence of actual boots on the ground, but I think what people need to do is take less of what Trump is saying literally what he is saying. You don't need to take it that way. Think more about the fact that China is trying to flex its muscles to exert control over the canal. The overall message that Trump's trying to get across. China is trying to influence South America. They are trying to take control over the Panama Canal. Whether they have troops on the ground or not, it is just a fact that is where China's ambitions are, and it must be stopped. Whether it's building two bridges in Panama that is fully funded by China or state-owned enterprises, or the fact that state-owned enterprises own 2 out of the 5 adjacent ports to the canal. Now, from China's perspective, they would love to expand their influence into South America. It's the backyard of their biggest adversary. Why would they not? For the same reasons that the Russians made very friendly with the Cubans back in the 60s when JFK was president. It's right in America's backyard, right in our backyard. They would love to have some control right in America's backyard. Now, and really to prepare themselves to take control over a geographical area that is very important to the world economy. Now, right now, for trade that is done over the sea, about 5% of all trade through ships comes through the Panama Canal. And without the Panama Canal, ships would be forced to reroute below the southern tip of South America, which would roughly add to the average trip about 7,000 nautical miles. Now, the canal is very, very important to American trade and to American national security. And with the possible trade war between the United States and China that we could be ramping up under the Trump administration, we should note that 75% of all ships that go through the canal are from America. And China's ability to manipulate that control over the canal and the ports could severely hurt the American economy and add major costs to trade. You think about that. If all ships were forced to reroute below the southern tip of South America, that is more wear and tear on the ships. That is more money and labor that you're going to have to spend for those ships to be manned. And it's going to be more direct cost when it comes to fuel. It's going to increase cost for everyone, not just Americans. It will increase for them. But for the world as a whole, cost will increase if we're not able to retain control over the Panama Canal at this point. And another thing to think about, even where we are right now, China's building a bridge in Panama that goes over the Panama Canal. They own 2 ports that are operated on each side of the canal. China is able to keep tabs on us. They're able to see how much activity is going through the canal. Has activity dropped? Is activity increasing? And also for national security reasons, you think about it. If the U.S. needs to mobilize its military for a conflict, and we need to do it using the sea, it is very, very, very strategic that the United States has control over that zone to be able to connect the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean. Imagine if we needed to mobilize someone to the other side, if we needed to mobilize a ship to the other side. We don't have time to spend 7,000 nautical miles to go around the tip of South America when you could take a couple hours and go through the Panama Canal. That is one of the biggest ones that I think we really need to be thinking about, as it is a strategic zone, it is a strategic geographical area for the United States military and just the militarial peace in the world as a whole. And we should recognize the basic fact. The canal was built by the blood, the sweat, and the money of the United States. The U.S., back in about 1903, secured the rights to the project, after a failed attempt by the French to build a canal there. The United States was able to get rights to build this canal there. And by 1914, it was completed. But and it cost about $10 billion in today's dollars to build the canal. Now, and it remained in the control of the United States until 1997. And this is when President Jimmy Carter signed a very, very foolish treaty that would hand the canal over to Panama within the next about 22 years. And by 1999, the Panama Canal Authority had exclusive control over the canal. Now, there was a stipulation inside of this agreement that was signed that stipulated that it will remain permanently neutral, but that the U.S. has the rights they reserve the rights to defend any threat to the canal's neutrality using military force under this deal. So there is legal precedent if the United States decides to use military force to annex the Panama Canal, to take it back, reassert its control over it. I think they have a pretty good legal stand-in to make the case to the American people that, the Panama Canal is under threat, that China could control this. Because the reality is it's Panama doesn't control it. It's either going to be the United States or China. Who's it going to be? And I sure as hell don't want it to be China that's going to have control over the operations, deciding what goes through and what doesn't go through the Panama Canal. Especially if we get into a conflict with China, that could be very detrimental to the United States. And, with China's recent actions, the U.S. has an absolute right to make sure that the canal remains neutral. An absolute right. And for me, we don't even have to have this legal precedent inside of this agreement. We have the Monroe Doctrine. We are not going to let people from the old world come to the new world and exert control over South America. It's just not going to happen. And we absolutely have a right to make sure that it remains neutral. And like I said, even if it means rendering control through the use of military force. I hope that we're able to do it economically, diplomatically with Panama. The Panamanian president came out and was not very fond of the idea of making a deal with the United States. But ultimately, we're a bigger superpower, and we will exert control over them if absolutely necessary. And with China's major investments in Panama and the infrastructure, the ports around the canal, the United States really needs to worry about China's ability to exert control through their Chinese companies that operate in the port. When it comes down to it, a major world event could occur. Who's going to have control over it? Like I just said, it's either going to be us, the United States, or China. And we should stop at absolutely nothing to make sure that China never has control over the Panama Canal, directly or indirectly. And the only way to guarantee that at this point is through the total control of the canal by the United States. You think about it, Panama back in, I believe it was 2017, and they have a nice little snippet about that in here. Let's see if we can find it in here. Let's see. 2017. Here we go. This is when Panama's strategic location means that China has been vying to increase its influence in the country for years, and it expands its footprint on a continent that has traditionally been considered, quote, the backyard of the United States. And in 2017, Panama broke diplomatic ties with Taiwan and established formal relations with China, a huge win for Chinese diplomacy. So you see, Panama has already taken steps during the first Trump administration to align themselves more closely with China. And with state-owned enterprises operating ports and investments that are occurring in the Panama Canal area, we definitely need to be worried about this and really consider the soft power influence that China is going to have in Panama when push comes to shove, when there is a world event that occurs, when the U.S. needs to mobilize its military. Whatever the case is, we need to be very, very conscious of the soft power influence that China has. So that's it for today, folks. I appreciate you tuning in. You guys have a good rest of your day.